On our journey down the Nile, you will learn about ancient Egypt and its many customs. We will visit temples where they worshipped and markets where they might have shopped. So let's begin our adventure of discovery with the Old Kingdom, which formed in Egypt around 3000 BC. It was the age of the pyramids and the age of the pyramid builders, a time when Pharaoh Menes first united Upper or Southern Egypt with the northern marshes of Lower Egypt and formed one land. And it was during this Old Kingdom, around 2500 BC, that the Great Pyramids and Sphinx of Giza were built by three pharaohs, Khufu, Khafra and Menkaure. Many years have passed, but the pyramids still stand, along with the majestic Sphinx of yesteryear. In the Middle Kingdom, from around 2000 BC, Osiris, whom you'll meet in a moment, became the most important of the gods and was worshipped throughout the land. When papyrus disappeared from this land, the ancient art of making paper from papyrus was lost until about 30 years ago, when Dr. Hassan Ragab started this papyrus plantation and rediscovered the art after many years of research. This village was the inspiration of Dr. Hassan Ragab, who wanted to recreate an ancient Egyptian village for you, dear visitor, to enjoy. The Pharaonic village covers an area of 32 acres, and we hope you will find this to be an amazing tour through Egyptian history and culture. Now let us journey through the canal of mythology and meet some of the ancient gods.
I am Osiris, the god of resurrection, judge of the underworld, lord of eternity. I was worshipped throughout the Middle Kingdom. When I am painted on the walls of tombs, I am often shown as a mummy, and my skin is green. But when I was king of Egypt, the land was peaceful and prosperous, and I was loved by all, until I was murdered by my jealous brother Set. He tore me into pieces, which he scattered throughout the land, and so I may have remained, had it not been for my faithful wife.
I am Isis, sister and wife of Osiris, and the goddess of fertility. When my husband was cruelly murdered, my sister Nephthys and I searched throughout the land for the pieces of his body, which we gathered from all 42 provinces of Egypt. When I brought Osiris back to life, we were able to conceive my son, Horus, who I hid in the papyrus reeds and raised before instructing him to avenge his father's death.
I am Horus, Falcon Lord, god of the sun and moon. My wicked uncle, Set, murdered my father and stole his throne. When I became a man, I attacked Set to reclaim what was mine. It was a bloody battle, and Set gouged out my left eye, blinding me silently. But Thoth, the god of wisdom, healed me, and I fought on. In the end, I triumphed and won back the throne. The symbol of my lost eye, the Eye of Horus, is now a magical amulet, protecting good from evil. Find it if you can.
I am Amun-Ra, the sun god, god of kings, king of the gods, ultimate ruler of all Egypt. The temple of Karnak, constructed by 30 pharaohs over hundreds of years, was built to honor me. My name means Hidden One, and I was indeed the keeper of a secret name, my most carefully guarded possession. But the goddess Isis tricked me and stole it. On my daily stroll through the heavens, she hid a serpent which struck me, and as its poison coursed through my limbs, so too did the waters of the Nile spill out over the land, flooding the fields of Egypt. When I felt this agony, I begged Isis to use her magic to save me. I screamed to her, "I am colder than water. I am hotter than fire. I tremble in all my limbs, and the sweat runs down my face, even as in the heat of summer." But still, she would not help. And so, desperate, I gave to her son Horus his two eyes, the sun and the moon, and whispered to her my secret name. And though she used my powers to strengthen her son, still he lost one of those eyes in his battle with Set. Would you like to hear my secret name now? Shall I whisper it to you? Never enough time.
I am Tutmosis III, Pharaoh of Egypt, but you may know me as the stepson of Queen Hatshepsut. When my father died, he appointed my stepmother, Hatshepsut, to be my regent, to advise me when I was young, so that I might grow to become a wise pharaoh. But when I reached manhood, Hatshepsut stole my throne and made herself pharaoh. She took over the kingdom and commanded the army in my place, and to commemorate her rule, she erected buildings in her honor, and even carved images of herself as a man with a beard into the walls and tombs of the Valley of the Kings. But my time was coming, and when she died and I became pharaoh, I had those same images destroyed, and her name stricken from the walls of the temples and tombs. I was sure that if I destroyed those relics, the world would forget her. But she had not been forgotten. And so, despite my 17 military campaigns and my great successes as pharaoh, I am often remembered only as Queen Hatshepsut's stepson, the pharaoh child in waiting. Won't history ever forget her reign? When will I be remembered for something more?
Standing in the water is a Nilometer, a gauge used by the ancient Egyptians to measure the rise of the annual flood which occurred every summer. This enabled tax assessors to estimate the revenue from the grain harvest the following spring. Even in those days, farmers complained that they did all the work and the taxman got all the profit.
I am Akhenaten, Pharaoh of Egypt and worshipper of one God. the god Artan. Until my 5th year of reign, I was known as Amenhotep IV, a name which means Amen is satisfied. But I turned away from the god Amen and the many other gods worshipped by my countrymen, and chose instead to worship one god and one god alone, Aten, the sun god, the giver of life, the protector of Egypt. I tried to teach my people the power of Aten, and I built for them a beautiful new capital, the city of Tel El Amarna. My wife Nefertiti and I lived in this capital, and it was there that she gave birth to my son Tutankhaten. But when I died, the people forsook my god and betrayed Aten to worship Amen once again. Even my son Tutankhaten gave up his birth name and became Tutankhamun to appease the masses. And so my city Tel El Amarna and my god Aten were abandoned by the Egyptians. But one day, Aten will rise again and be worshipped by all. Is today that day?
I am Ramses the Great, Pharaoh of Egypt, ruler of the land. I was the most powerful pharaoh in all of history, and I ruled Egypt for 66 years. The Greeks called me Ozymandias and wrote stories of my works, for I was the king of kings. In the southern lands, my wife Nefertari and I built a new temple, Abu Simbel, and near Thebes we constructed the Ramesseum temple in the desert. With my army, I defeated the Hittites, the Nubians, foreign sea pirates, and all other invaders. For Egypt ruled the world. Sadly, all things must pass, and so too did I, but not before having 100 children. To the desert I returned, buried as a mummy in the Valley of the Kings. After my death, 9 more pharaohs took the name Ramses in my honor, but there was only one me, Ozymandias, king of kings.
Most famous of Ramesses II's monuments is the great temple at Abu Simbel in Nubia, south of Aswan. This magnificent building, with its famous colossal statues of the king, was cut entirely in the rock, along with the nearby temple of Ramesses' favorite queen, Nefertari. The 2 temples were rescued from the waters of Lake Nasser when the Aswan High Dam was being built in the 1960s. This scene shows the discovery of the child Moses, whose mother had put him in a basket and floated it on the Nile to prevent him from being killed by Pharaoh's soldiers. The child was discovered by a member of Pharaoh's family and was brought up in the royal palace. Eventually he became a prophet who led his own people, the Hebrews, out of Egypt. The grotesque dwarf god Bes was a great favorite with the Egyptians. He was believed to protect people against snakes and scorpions, and was particularly regarded as a patron of women in childbirth. In general, Bes was the god of pleasure and enjoyment of every kind. life in ancient Egypt comes alive with scenes of agriculture and industry. The nobleman and his wife are enjoying the fresh air in their garden pavilion. They are playing a game called senet, a game for 2 players, a form of which is still played in Egypt today. Ploughing is the first operation in preparing the land for cultivation, and here we see the ploughman with his team and a simple wooden plough. After ploughing, the heavy clods of soil are broken up with a hoe, and then furrows are made with the broad-bladed mattock. The sower scatters the seed from a small bag or basket, and sheep follow the sower to press the seed into the tough soil with their feet. Beside the houses in the background are pigeon towers. The Egyptians kept pigeons for food, and they were used for carrying messages, especially for the army. The fields are irrigated by means of the shadoof, which works like a balance, with a bucket at one end of a long pole and a heavy stone as a counterweight. Shadoofs are still sometimes used in the Egyptian countryside. When the grain is harvested, the sheaves are carried to the threshing floor in a net bag hung on a long pole. When a thick layer of grain has been spread on the circular floor, oxen or cows are driven round to break up the ears of grain with their heavy feet. The next process is winnowing, when the grain is tossed up into the air so that the lighter chaff or husk will blow away on the wind. The grain is then taken to be stored in the silos. The scribe makes a careful record of all the grain which is being stored. This was important for taxation purposes, as there was no money in Egypt in Pharaonic times. Honey was used for sweetening by the ancient Egyptians, as sugarcane was not grown in Egypt in those days. Beehives were made of pottery tubes piled up in rows, and in some parts of the country, beehives are still made this way today. The River Nile was the main highway of communication in Pharaonic times, so boat building was an important industry. Small boats were made of bundles of papyrus tied together with ropes. Such boats were used for short journeys and for fishing or hunting trips. Larger boats were made of wood, usually cedar wood imported from Lebanon. Wooden boats were pegged together with dowels and sewn together with ropes, as can be seen in the cross-section on the bank. When the boat was put into the water, the wood expanded and the rope shrank, so the boat became completely watertight. A royal boat of this type can be seen in the museum beside the Great Pyramid of King Cheops at Giza. The palm tree was a valuable resource for the Egyptians. The trunk was used in house building, and the branches provided fronds for making mats and baskets, while furniture and boxes were made from the ribs. The boxes were used for storage and as cages for small animals and birds. The Egyptians today still use the various parts of the palm tree for the same purposes. There were many different kinds of fish in the Nile and its canals which made good food, and fishing was also popular as a sport. One method of fishing can be seen here, where a net is stretched between 2 boats, and the fisherman hits the water with a stick to frighten the fish into the net. Let's see if he's been lucky today.
Ancient Egyptians were the first people to do sports. We have many depictions showing us the ancient Egyptians while they were playing stick fighting, archery, and wrestling.
Next are demonstrations of some industries and crafts, the first of which is brickmaking. The material used is the Nile mud, which is mixed with water and chopped straw into a thick paste. This paste is put into a wooden mould, and the bricks are then simply left to dry in the sun. As there is little heavy rain in Egypt, these mud bricks can last for centuries. The houses of the ancient Egyptians, even the palaces of the pharaohs, were constructed of sun-dried mud brick. The roof was made of split palm trunks covered with branches. The building was covered with a thick layer of mud, which acted as insulation against heat, wind, and rain. Glassmaking was introduced into Egypt after the military campaigns of Thutmose III about 1450 BC, when captive glassmakers were brought here from Syria. Glass was used for making beads, inlays, amulets and small vessels, which were formed around a core, as glass blowing was not invented until the 1st century BC. In Ptolemaic times, Alexandria became a centre of glass craftsmanship, and in the Roman period fine cameos were produced in the same city. The Egyptians are also famous for mummifying their dead. Mummification is basically dehydration, and to speed up this process, the internal organs of the body were removed and preserved separately. The body was dried out by being covered with natron salt, a form of soda found in the deserts of Egypt. The body was then cleaned and embalmed and wrapped in several layers of linen bandages. Amulets were put between the bandages to protect the mummy from harm. The whole process took 70 days. Pottery making is one of the oldest crafts in Egypt, dating back to about 6000 BC. The clay is kneaded with water and mixed with ground potsherds or chopped straw, which helps the finished pot to dry evenly without cracking. The potter forms the pot with his fingers as he kicks the wheel round with his foot. The handles are added afterwards, and the pot is dried in the sun for a while before being fired. Now for a little Egyptian magic. This scene shows the different stages in decorating a stone wall. First of all, the surface is levelled, then smoothed and polished with a piece of hard stone. Grid lines are marked in red on the prepared surface to ensure accurate enlargements of the original drawings. The artist copies the outline onto the wall, working from the sketch made by the chief artist on a small slab of stone or a piece of papyrus. Then the sculptor carves the design in relief with his mallet and chisel. Finally, the details would be painted in colour to make the picture look as realistic as possible. Statues were partially carved in the quarry where the stone for them was cut. First of all, the block of stone is separated from the rock face by hammering wooden wedges into holes cut in the rock. The wedges are soaked with water, and as the wood expands, the block breaks away. After the stone has been smoothed and polished, the profile of the work is outlined on one side, and then the sculptor carves out the figure, rounding it off first on the front and then on the back. Vases were made from various kinds of stone, particularly alabaster, a soft stone which was worked into beautiful designs. After the rough piece of alabaster has been polished smooth, the inside is hollowed out with a drill with a flint or copper bit. The vase is sunk into the ground to prevent cracking during drilling. Alabaster vases were used as lamps, and for storing perfumes and precious oils. The tools of the carpenter and joiner were made of copper, wood and bronze. On the left, a man is sawing a log of wood into planks. Other tools used were a hammer, chisel, an adze and a bow drill for boring holes. It was important to the pharaohs that the army was well equipped at all times. Weapons included bows and arrows, swords, battle axes and spears, as well as shields and throw sticks. The horse-drawn war chariot was introduced into Egypt by the Hyksos from Western Asia around 1700 BC. Perfumes were very popular in ancient Egypt and consisted chiefly of fragrant oils and fats. The juice is extracted from sweet-smelling flowers in a bag of heavy canvas, the ends of which are twisted in opposite directions with wooden bars. This scented extract is then mixed with oil or fat as a base. Linen made from the flax plant was used by the Egyptians for clothing and many other purposes. Bundles of flax stalks are pulled through a large wooden comb to remove the tops and leaves. The stalks are soaked in water for a few days to soften them and then beaten with a wooden mallet. They are then pulled through a smaller comb to separate the fibres from the outer woody covering, and the good fibres are picked out and spun into thread on a spindle. The fine linen thread is then woven into cloth on a loom. The earliest looms in Egypt were horizontal, and the upright loom was brought to this country by the Hyksos. Another important industry was papyrus paper making, for which the government had the monopoly. The lowest part of the stem is the best part for paper making. The outer green rind is peeled off.
Yeah.
Room number 8. Now let's go to start with the temple. This is a simple model of the Pharaonic temple located in Luxor. It starts with Ramhed Avenue like this. The original one was about 3 kilometers to connect between the Pharaonic and Luxor temple. But now we have just the remains of it. And the most important character here is the high priest. No one can do anything without his permission in the temple. And his clothes refer that he is very strong, smart, and wise. Now let's go and see the first hall of the temple.
Assalamualaikum.
This is the first hall here. It's called the open court. And whose roof is to let the sun rise into the temple. Only the high officials and other men allowed to enter here to offer the offering to God. And we used to put the statues of God here in this box during the festival and preparation. because as depression they put outside in the books. And this is a simple offering to the poor.
Biji-biji.
This one left is in of color cut. It goes between Ramses II and the gods. It lived about 16 years and ended the first peace treaty in the history. After the peace treaty, they had a political match between Ramses II and the Dutch king of the gods to stop the war. And they did everything with the hieroglyphics like this. Let's see it. Okay, we have a free tour. We have a free tour then. 3 ways. From the top to bottom like this. Right to left and left right. It was depends on the head of the bird. For example here, all of the birds are looking right. So we will read it from right to left. And here, from the left right for the same reason. And the most important sign is this one, the royal cartouche. It's a reality sign, right? The name of king inside. For example, Ramses II, Moses III, Cleopatra, and Hatshepsut. And Champollion translated the hieroglyphics with this one. This is a replica of Rosetta Stone. The farmer's house was very simple. With just 1 or 2 rooms for the whole family. And the lady's house here used to do everything with her own hands. Now she's making the flour to bake the bread. And her husband used to do just one
Buat
thing.
gandum.
He used to light the fire like this. Have a look.
Itu lagi nyalain api sana. Nyalain api.
Usually it takes from 20 minutes to 1 hour to light the fire because they used to put some oils and dry leaves. Let's go back to see the rich people's house. Okay, this is the lady's court. She sits here and puts the servant hold hair on the shoulder. Let's go in the house. Just sitting like this, putting her makeup on and giving orders to her servants. Also, she had made with her playing for her some music, like this scene behind her. And on the other room, there is the furniture they used to have. Take a look. The next part, we have 3 rooms in it. First thing, the toilet. Second, the shower room. The last one, the storage or the storeroom. Let's start with the toilet over here and go this way to the rest of the room. Start with the toilet, see it.
Kamar pembantu.
We have the servants who don't rest during the day. We had a separate house to let them. They weren't here. And this is the kitchen with 2 ovens, one for baking and the other for cooking. Also, it was rootless to let the smoke and the heat goes out. This is the staple. And the most important thing here we have the sides. They used to put the seeds inside, especially they put from the top and from the bottom. So first time, first time. Go.
Iya, peternakan kandang.
This is the get shop. Most of the things here are handmade inside the bag. You have the intestine, steak, scopes, boxes, bags, and small souvenirs here. Take your time if you want to buy anything. Okay.
Hey.